I'm saying good afternoon and Happy New Year to everyone, and welcome to our Irrigation 101 class, followed by an hour discussion on agreements, do's and don'ts. I am Peggy West, your host and organizer for today's class. And yes, I'm wearing a mask, as you can see. I encourage everyone to please wear your mask and be safe. And I wanted to announce that since the beginning of the year, or maybe mid-December, I have lost my 19 COVID pounds. So yay, that's what I was clapping for. Today we have 9 sponsors, so let's get started. And let's get introduced, and you can learn a little bit about who is interested in working with you in this industry. Again, my name is Peggy West, and I am the Director of Business Development for PuroClean. We are water, fire, mold, damage remediation specialists, and we also provide biohazard and COVID-19 services. All are 24/7, 365 days a year. And if you need any of these services, I want you to remember the 2 P's. That's P for Peggy and P for PuroClean. With that, I want to turn this over to one of the co-organizers and also our Q&A moderator for today, Jonathan Doro. Jonathan's with Ventium Software, and I'll let you tell a little bit about that, John.
Thank you very much. My name is Jonathan. I work with Ventium Software, and sorry about that. I work with Ventium Software. We make websites and communication software for condos, HOAs, and their property management companies. Ultimately, you know, we have a lot of cool tools to ensure that residents are communicating with their boards, with their management companies. We just started a new tool. We've actually partnered with Zoom, same solution that we're using here today, to superpower and supercharge board meetings. So virtual meetings, we've got some surveys on there as well, allowing boards to easily make some decisions on things such as landscaping. We've got a lot of tools for helping to communicate with email, SMS, voice automated messaging. We've got service requests. You could track what's going on. If you have a landscaping ticket, that'll automatically be, you know, you could go ahead and snap that with snap a picture with your cell phone, upload that, and go ahead and get Juniper out there to address those issues. We've got a lot of other time-saving tools that bring communities together. 2020 has taught us anything. It's that communities matter, and even if you can't physically be close to somebody, that doesn't mean that you have to be completely distant and relegated to your apartment or home. There's a lot of other avenues in which we can connect, and Vinteum is here for that sort of thing. So thank you very much, Peggy. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and looking forward to a great meeting.
Thank you, Jonathan. And just as a reminder, any condo association that has 150 units or more really needs a website, and Jonathan has some great features for you to offer. I want to next introduce Jimmy Gonzalez from LM Funding. He is the market director for Florida. Jimmy, you want to tell us a little bit about your company?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Peggy. Thank you, Jonathan, for this wonderful class and opportunity. I am the market director for LM Funding, and LM Funding is a specialty finance company. We monitor and manage the collection process for associations. We are not a collection agency. We use attorneys only, but we manage that process. We fund the association up to 100% of their safe harbor up front, and we put the attorneys on the case for you. If there's no collection to be made due to bank foreclosure or bankruptcy or anything really, LM Funding pays all of the legal fees and costs. So we take the risk to be part of your community and to work with you in collecting your assessments. We also have a brand new program right now for any referral to LM Funding for a new association, 3 units, you will be receiving a check for $500. So if you have any interest, you have some questions, feel free to reach out to me after the class. We can make some time to meet in person or Zoom and further discuss it. But we're here to help. We've been doing it for 12 years. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jimmy. Okay, next I'd like to introduce Carmelo Giglio. He's an engineer, and he is the owner, principal of United Professional Engineering. Carmelo?
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. Again, my name is Carmelo. I'm a professional engineer, a special inspector. I've got a lot of experience doing construction management and engineering design and structures. Again, it's United Professional Engineering. We've been in business for over 16 years, actually. And we do building restoration engineering, which comprises of concrete repairs, re-roofs, specifications, new windows and doors, repaints, waterproofing, site walls, seawalls. We also do structural engineering for new structures, alterations, renovations, cooling tower framing, etc. So
Hey, if you order lunch, give me a
we do pretty much everything related to the building, and we service.
what do we have?
Like I said, we service mainly South Florida. So be happy to help you out. Reach out to us if you need any help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, let's introduce Ron Giles. He's Vice President for Pipe Restoration Solutions, which is PRS. Ron, tell us about your company. Oh, is Ron not on?
I'm not seeing her on, Peggy.
Okay, all right, we'll move along, but just to mention, Ron's company insulates condominium pipes, old pipes, to prevent you from having to totally renovate. And he saves quite a bit of money on one hand while you're spending a little bit of money, but it's a long-lasting process and something if you need, give him a shout. He's an expert in it. I'll move down then to Rudy Martin, Vice President of Business Development and a partner with Munyon Painting.
Thank
Rudy?
you.
Mm-hmm.
So we are celebrating our 70th year this year. Since 1951, we've been providing painting, waterproofing, restoration, and roof coatings. So I put all of my contact information in the chat section. Also my counterpart, Jack Chittum, he's participating as an attendee today. He's also on this. So for all of your roof coating needs, your painting needs, your waterproofing, and your restoration needs, please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help. Thank you, Peggy.
You're welcome. All right, so now I'm going to introduce Katie Phillips. She is the Community Association Education Director for Rosenbaum PLLC. Katie, tell us
Thanks,
about
Peggy.
Rosenbaum.
I'm Katie Phillips with Rosenbaum PLLC. We are a full service law firm, so we handle your general association matters, litigation, document amendments, collections, and we do everything in-house. We don't have to refer out any of your collection matters. We have offices in West Palm Beach and in Stewart. So I have typed in the chat my contact information. If you need any help with contract reviews or any of that type of thing, please reach out to us. I did want to say to you also that Paula Mera from our firm, who is a shareholder attorney, was going to be with us today. And I do apologize, but she is out sick. So hoping that she is just recovering, and hope you all have a great class. Thanks for attending.
Thanks, Katie. Also, if you have any questions, I will be sending out a list of all the sponsors with their contact information, and you can reach out to Katie and she can connect you with an attorney in this industry. I want to turn this over now to Lisa Elkin. She is a Vice President at Alliance Association Bank. Lisa, tell us all your goodies.
Thank you, Peggy. And I'd really like to kick off 2021 with your small bank blues. They're melting away. Don't make a brand new start of it with your same old bank. With AAB, we will always help you make it there. We will help you make it anywhere. It's up to you to move to a new bank. Well, it's time to be completely frank with you. We at Alliance Association Bank want to be your banking partner in 2021. Why? For starters, we've been listening to you. And this new year, we continue to answer. We have competitive rates, easy loan processes, less paperwork, less stress, and less headaches. So make 2021 a year that your management company or association makes the move where you will wake up to a bank that never sleeps. So just give me a call, Lisa Elkin, your South Florida representative, and let me know that you're going to tell your bank you're leaving today. You want to be a part of it. AAB. Thank you.
Very nice. Okay, everybody clap. That was awesome. Very good. How can we resist you? Besides, she's beautiful, right? Okay, let's get into the class here. I am going to introduce the area representative first from Juniper Landscaping, Brian Van Dam. Brian is the Director of Business Development, and he's in Davie, Florida, and also, Director of Sales and Business Development. He's been in the lawn care industry for more than 30 years. He's lived in South Florida his entire life, and very knowledgeable on the insects, diseases that can impact South Florida lawns, plants, and palms. Brian has had articles published in the cultural practices of maintaining and irrigating turf in South Florida, and he currently resides in West Broward with his wife and 3 sons. He has a degree in business from the University of South Florida, and he also carries licenses and has achievements and certifications as follows. He is certified in the green industry with the best management practices by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, along with the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, a past president of the Florida Pest Management Association, and also named in the top 40 industry leaders in the United States under the age of 40 in PCT magazine in 2003. So welcome, Brian. You're also one of my new sponsors. I appreciate all your hard work. And with that, I'm going to let you introduce your instructor.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Peggy. Just a little bit about Juniper Landscaping. We are a commercial landscaping company focused on commercial properties and HOAs. I am based in South Florida, as Peggy said, but we do cover the majority of Florida. At Juniper, we would like to build a great working relationship with you and your team, one based on trust, quality service, and consistent results. We form strategic partnerships with the property managers and management companies we work with, and we look forward to becoming a trusted resource for you and your team. In doing so, you will soon find out why Juniper is different from all other landscape companies. Our services do include landscape maintenance, landscape design and install, irrigation design, install, and maintenance, lawn and ornamental pest control, fertilization, weed control, mulch, tree and palm trimming. We have a hurricane action plan. We provide CEU classes for property managers. We offer Juniper Sync, which is our own communication software for residents as well as property managers. We have Juniper Advanced Mapping, which is high resolution images of your property. And we also have Juniper Cares, which is the way we give back to the communities that we serve. We offer exceptional communication and consistent results. Thank you again, Peggy, for the opportunity to participate in the program today. I would like to, with that, introduce Jonh Dougherty, who will be our presenter today. Jonh is our Vice President of Maintenance Sales with Juniper Landscaping. Jonh has over 20 years experience working with condominium and homeowner associations from Naples to Jacksonville in the fields of landscape maintenance, fertilization, pest control, landscape design, landscape installation, irrigation, and arbor care. After obtaining his CAM license in 2014, he worked for 2 years as divisional director at an association management company. This helped deepen his understanding of the challenges faced by community association boards. Jonh has had the privilege of serving on the board of directors of the Community Association Institute of Central Florida for over 4 years. And as a board member, he served the trade show committee liaison and worked closely with education providers for CEU and other educational programs at their annual trade show and various luncheons. In his positions, he has conducted many hours of training on a variety of subjects for his team and board members. Jonh currently instructs 4 continuing education courses that are approved by the DPPR. Jonh is also experienced and licensed and holds certifications from FNGLA as a landscape contractor, a certified horticultural professional. He is an ISA certified arborist and a community association manager. John, thank you so much for agreeing to participate and provide the education for today's program. I now turn it over to you.
Well, that's the longest I've ever been quiet in my life, just so everybody knows. And I'm so glad I get to talk for 2 hours straight. Some real quick things ahead. Here's our agenda that we're going to be discussing today. The purpose of an irrigation system should only take about 5 minutes. We should know what that is. The overview and layout of it. And then we're going to get into the components of an irrigation system. The heads, pipe, valves, how they work, backflows, sensors, wiring, and control. Then there will be a quiz, so make sure you know how to use the chat feature, because if you do know how to use the chat feature, you're going to win some pretty cool prizes. Well, I think they're cool prizes for today. Thank you for that great introduction. I almost felt like it was my eulogy, and I was like, I should do some more exciting things besides landscaping at this point. So thank you very much, Brian. This is a 101 class, so this is the basics. If this isn't going to be about velocity loss and hydraulics like all of our directors teach over in Fort Myers. So this is a 101 class. It'll be the basics, but really give you some tools you can use in your association management. I'm not going to sing like Lisa. So if I do start singing, you have full permission to leave because it'll be awful and it's gone completely off the rails at that point. So we will go ahead and get started. And let me just, there we go. In case you didn't hear enough about me, there's a lot. The only things Brian missed is my favorite color is green. So if you want to send me something nice, I like anything that's green. And I have a cat named Bentley. And everybody who goes to one of my classes knows you're going to see my cat. It's just the way it works. I'm sorry, I wish I could stop it, but this is Bentley. He's 18 years old. And that's one of the 5 minutes he's actually awake in his life. So there you go, a little bit more about me. So the purpose of irrigation. The purpose of irrigation is mainly for us to supplement the rainfall in Florida. In summertime, this isn't as big of a deal. As we know, we end up getting anywhere from 2 to 3 inches, sometimes in a day, sometimes in 15 minutes. So it's really there to make sure to maintain our landscapes during those times of drought or lack of rainfall. It also allows us to do things we shouldn't necessarily be able to do in certain areas. This is a house we did custom design over in Casey Key. None of this stuff belongs where it goes, but through the power of irrigation and design, we're able to do things like this. It's what makes our associations beautiful. It's what makes Southwest Florida and Southeast Florida so tropical and nice, because we're able to keep these things alive due to irrigation. Without proper irrigation, things can go sideways pretty quick. This is a community out in Amelia Island. This happened in about a 3.5 to 4 weeks time span. We ended up taking over the job. This is some zoysia turf. Zoysia, though it is drought tolerant, just means it won't die immediately. It will brown out pretty quick. We got about 80–90% of this to come back, which was nice. But when you don't have your irrigation running or working properly, these are the things that can happen. The overview of your system, a few things you should know. The most important one, and the one that you probably get the largest bill for as a CAM, I know it was when I was a CAM, is the main line. Anytime you hear the word, oh, we have a main line break, it literally causes a migraine. This is your potable, not potable water, but your reclaim, I guess it could be potable. If you're super rich and fancy, it'd be potable. Reclaim water, well water, this is your main pressurized line that's coming into the system. That will then be broken up into your valves. So that goes to your valves, which then go out to lateral lines. You'll also know lateral lines as your zones. So each valve that you have is representative of a zone in your irrigation. So breaks before valves really, really hurt because you have to shut down the whole system, unless you have some isolation valves that we'll talk about later. And then they go after the valve. When they're on lateral lines, it's not as severe, as you can isolate those areas. As you can see here, this valve controls this brown area. So if this valve's down, that's the only part out. If we have a mainline break here, we're going to have every valve down. Then, of course, we get to heads. We all know heads because they're the things that break and give us volunteer water features constantly, and the ones we receive the most service requests on. So that's a basic overview of an irrigation system. We're going to look at sprinkler heads and drip lines and define what they are and the different types. We all know the pop-up head, the amazing 4-inch pop-up head that has been used forever. A lot of things can be done with these. What I recommend, if you have an older system, you probably have 4-inch pop-up heads. You want to make sure to have start replacing with 6. It's just a smarter way to do it as you're replacing. So as the thatch and the grass grows up. The other thing is, you'll notice here, there's seals around these. These dry out over time. And trust me, we have tried everything, and it looks weird, I'm telling you. We'll take silicone gel and try to make sure these work. And once these dry out, they end up sticking up. And that's why they generally get cut with the lawnmower or run over by cars and things like that. So these do have a lifespan to them. How we normally see them, I don't know about you guys, but this is normally how I see my irrigation heads. I received the call because we have a brown spot, there's broken irrigation head. This is a project we took over just down the street from my house in Winter Garden. We turned on one zone and there were 3 or 4 broken heads on it. Broken heads end up reducing the pressure on the rest of the line, and that's why you end up getting these brown spots. There's only so much pressure to go around, and you'll see this whole irrigation zone is running, but due to these 2 breaks, you almost see nothing coming out of these heads down this way. So it's important to stay on top of those breaks. These are my favorite. These are the prettier ones. So closer to the valve line, we're getting more pressure. So we get these beautiful volunteer water features, as we like to call them. These are the ones we receive the most calls on. This happens very rarely with rotors. If it does, they're generally quite larger. The best way to do these is to make sure to have a regular maintenance program and be checking them and turn in service requests for them. Rotors, these are the ones that are going to cover larger areas, backyards, sports turf areas, large common areas. These are generally the more expensive heads. The pop-up heads are relatively inexpensive. As you can see, with all the gears and mechanisms in it, they get to charge us for all that stuff, which is great. These are the ones that will spin, anywhere from 360 degrees to only, 10 degrees if that's what you need them to do. But generally, these are used in larger areas where you need a lot of turf covered and not in shrub areas at all. Some that's come out over the last 10 years or so, probably longer because I've been in this well and I remember them a while back, but let's just go with 10 years because it makes me feel younger. And that's what this is about today, education and making me feel younger. So sprinkler heads like these new MP rotators are really great. What they allow us to do is we can match the precipitation rate of those rotors. So now we can put a spray head in a smaller area with these and cover some, some of those hard to reach areas, but still keep the timing right that's going on with the rotors. The other thing these are nice for is they put out a lot less water per minute. So your standard pop-up head's putting out anywhere, a gallon to 2.5 gallons per minute, depending on the type of nozzle it has. These MP rotators are putting out 0.75 to 1.5 at the max. So if you're trying to match up some areas where you have some areas, especially between homes, what we found is instead of redoing the entire irrigation system, because when they build the homes, they build them each individually, which is nice. But then they put in those irrigation systems separately, and now we have double the water there. Instead of going through and redesigning both homes, we just go through and change out the nozzles to nozzles that are about half the precipitation rate. Most of those homes on the sides run on the same zones that are on the front or the back that are getting full sun. So we don't really have an option for changing times, but these MP rotators are quite efficient and a good solution for us in that. Drip lines. This is an important one, especially with some of the new codes coming out that are requiring us to have 50% drip irrigation. Nice thing about drip irrigation, especially in Southwest Florida, where Sarasota, where I got my hands spanked for doing this wrong and learned how to do it right. These here, you can run them during, since there is no real water loss, we're actually able to run all of our drip zones during water restrictions because we have no actual water loss. There's no over-the-top spray. These are great for plantings. I have seen them used in turf. The only municipality that I know that's used it is Fort Myers, Florida. They actually ran it underneath the turf successfully. I wouldn't necessarily do it, but they've done it. But these are most likely used in situations for established shrub material and larger material that you'd have. Micro irrigation, very popular in planter beds, pots, things like that. Annual flowers, they're very popular in using. I'm not a huge fan of them just because that little tiny line tends to clog up very easily, and we have them in things that we want lots of water on and then they die. So I'm not the biggest fan of them, but when you have hard to reach areas, these are a good option to use. Bubblers. Okay, so I didn't know anything this tiny could cause such a problem. So bubblers, I know they don't seem like a big deal, but when you work with the architects and the irrigation designers that put these in, so if you're a maintenance guy like me, you like an adjustable bubbler, right? I can have it put a half gallon out, I can have it put 5 gallons out, this is great. If you're designing an irrigation system, you don't want the option for something to be able to go from 0.5 to 5, a multiple of 10, just by someone turning it. Because you're really designing the system to work efficiently. So you'll see on most designs, they have fixed bubblers on them, which is this, they've designed the system to run this long and match the gallons per minute for each tree. So it's very important if you have fixed bubblers on there to leave them on there, because the designers and irrigation designers have put a lot of thought and time into that. Also, once these get established, if you have a project that's 6, 7, 8 years old and the trees have been established for a while, you'd be shocked how many projects I go on there 15, 20 years old and they still have bubblers on oak trees that are lifting up sidewalks. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it doesn't need a bubbler. It's destroying my hardscapes. I don't need any more water on it. So it can also be a good source of water savings, is to be able to take those bubblers on those large mature trees and palms and cut them back. One caution to that is making sure, in South Florida, we have a lot of the Medjool palms and date palms. Those are arid palms. So make sure anything you're doing with irrigation, I've seen some people plant flowers and things and add irrigation on top of those. I'd be very cautious of that. As they are an arid palm tree, it takes them, they like it dry and it takes them a while to die. But if we pile flowers and irrigation on something that likes to live in a desert, we could be causing additional problems. That's my little PSA about arid palm trees. So this is what an irrigation plan looks like. It's confusing if you don't know what to look for, and it's confusing even when you do. So if you do have one, and this is why I talk about the irrigation designers do a lot on putting in, the pressure of each head, what the flow rate is, what the radius is, and matching each one up to the valve, because you have to make sure you have enough water through each lateral line to support each head. They've made this dummy proof for us landscapers. You can see here's a circle with a quarter on it. That means it's a quarter head, super easy for us. Here's one that's 50%. We know that's a half, which makes it pretty easy. We see these big ones. We're like, oh, those aren't heads, those are valves. And there's these nice little symbols here that tell us what things are. You'll notice here, this is called square spacing, where it's head-to-head spacing. Proper way to do it. You also see these are filled in. These are rotors that go 360 degrees. So this is generally what we work off when doing an installation. If you've ever wondered, you don't have to wonder any longer. There it is. There we go. Oh, I need to go back to that. So talking about spacing, when it comes to spacing, the head-to-head coverage, you'll notice here, this is called triangle spacing. And then the rest of these is square spacing. And we're going to discuss that briefly. So one of the most common mistakes that happens in landscape is we have a 15-foot head. We put it 15 feet away from the other head, right? It's 15 feet, 15 feet, 15 feet, 30 feet. I only need 2 heads. Problem when we do that and we don't have head-to-head coverage, we end up with these gaps, and that's what you see here. So what we recommend is one of 2 things, which is square spacing, which is actually a great app for getting things paid for. But this is square spacing as in for irrigation. So this is head-to-head coverage with the nozzles match, a full in the middle, a half, a quarter, and a half creates that nice square spacing here. And that gives us even coverage throughout. Now, you'll notice there isn't a whole lot of waste here, right? It's staying all within the box, which is great. You know, most times we don't want it to overspray a sidewalk. 99% of the time, we don't want it to overspray anything. But there are situations, and for all of you on the coast, I know you have it. We have this thing that comes off the ocean called wind, and it moves the water when it's right on line. And we'll end up getting these dry spots all along the edges because we have it right to the line of where it should be. In those types of situations, what we're using is triangular spacing to get a little bit of overcast on it to kind of mitigate that wind, or even setting the heads to spray in the dominant wind position. And that's an important thing, because you can have everything running right, but if you have, you know, a constant sea breeze, which sounds like a great drink to have while looking at your irrigation, it would really help you to have a little bit of overspray on that, or over coverage. Hey, Jonathan, are there any questions that I need to stop and answer?
Not at this point. It seems like you're being extremely thorough, but just a quick reminder, if anybody does have a question, we do have a Q&A section. Feel free to go ahead and shoot us a note in there.
All right, because otherwise I'll just keep talking forever. It's the way it works. All right, so an important thing, I'm not saying this is on the quiz, but it's an important thing to know. The proper spacing is what you see here for drip lines for irrigation. You want them about 12 to 16 inches apart. Look, I even popped it in there, so you'll remember 12 to 16 inches is for proper coverage. And we're gonna go over why, because most times I see these drip lines, I see people say, well, the plant is here, why would I put the drip line here? The plant's here. Like, you're not putting the drip lines anywhere near the plants are. And we're gonna review that briefly. So this is from Hunter. This is our actual diagram of how to lay out a two-wire system, a drip line system. So you're gonna notice a few things here. You're gonna notice, first thing we're gonna talk about is the spacing. You see how each one of these has a circle, that's where the water's coming from. The goal is to have the plant in the middle where it's getting overlap from either side, opposed to being right on top of the plant material. This is giving it more of an even water coverage, and that's why you'll see them set up like this, where you would think the old time we used to use black soaker hoses that we would just fill and they would just basically dump out water. These are quite a bit more efficient and a little bit more high tech. The nice thing about them too is, you know, one of the biggest questions we receive is, my drip line isn't working, which is quite common for people to think that. Now, everybody's plants are alive, I never see it run. Well, you shouldn't. It's drip line and it's underneath mulch. If you're seeing it run, it's probably broken and we need to come fix it. One thing we started using on some of those frequent flyers, as we like to call them in association management, is we installed these little things called operational flags. So this literally pokes right into the drip line, and you turn on the drip irrigation and the flag goes up if there's water pressure. And you'd be surprised how that makes everybody's day. Okay, there's water in the line, now I feel better. I can't count how many times I've dug up drip line, grabbed a cup, turned on the zone and go, look, it's working. Yeah, but I don't think it's working over there. These kind of help mitigate that. Two things that you really want to be sure of to know where they are on your drip irrigation system. And I would say one is the manual flush valve, because if you do get a break in your irrigation system, which I don't know if you know this, it always gets a break at some point. This manual flush valve will allow you to get any dirt or debris out of the line. But more importantly, probably the number one thing I see missed with irrigation drip line systems is the cleaning of the filter. So from the maintenance end, you know, when construction puts stuff in, everything's brand new. It always works. By the time we take over a project, it might be a few years from the installation or maybe even a decade. Knowing where these valve boxes are and checking these filters. These filters get clogged up, and when they do, it reduces the pressure to the line. That then makes it where not enough water comes out. Also, how these boxes are installed. You can see that this filter is right here and you'd have to unscrew it to pull it off. If this valve box is pushed forward, we're not able to actually get the filter off. So that's a big thing. If you do have a new project starting up, say, hey, where are the filters, and show me how they come off. Because you'd be surprised how many projects we take over where we know the filter hasn't been changed since it started because you can't get the filter off unless you remove the whole box. And lastly, there is a pressure regulator. If you're getting blowouts on your drip irrigation system, I'll guarantee you probably don't have the pressure regulator on it. And what's happening is you're running full 65 PSI through drip line, and those things are only held together by barbs. If you're using, tie clamps and all these things to hold it together, you probably don't have a pressure regulator on there, and you really should, because the system is not designed to be fully pressurized.
Hey, John, I've got a quick question that came in from Gerald. How often would you suggest performing a wet check in a large community?
So great question. An actual wet check where we run all the zones, I suggest once a month, but I suggest visuals weekly. So on large communities that we do, especially those with residential homes, we recommend that the techs, when they're doing their quarter, they break the community out in quarters. When they're checking the one section, they're driving through the other three, because irrigation is one of those things. In Florida, if we don't get rain, we're coming up on it too. March and April, we get beautiful weather, but no rain. And those temperatures start getting in the 80s. Stuff can go pretty sideways pretty quick. So once a month is normally sufficient with weekly visuals.
And those checks, should that be written in a contract? I know we're going to be touching on this a little bit later, but is that something that should be written into a contract, or is that something that's more of the, CAM's role?
Yeah, I generally always like them in mine, where I'd say, you will check it once a month by physically turning on the valves and the zones and things like that. But then you will do visual inspections for any dry areas. And I also tie that in with the fertilization pest control, because the crew should be responsible on large projects. They're there every day. They need to be doing regular inspections.
Perfect. Thanks for that.
No problem. One of my favorite things now in a physical class, I have one of these swing joints, and I might not sing, but I might do a swing joint dance. I don't. Just makes you think that the in-person class is funner. But no, I actually bring all these parts out when we do the physical class, and it's kind of neat. So we used to have to build these back in the day, but these swing joints here, instead of hard piping them, the old way was to put a T in and pipe the PVC right to it. The problem that runs into that is when pressure hits that, it cracks your lateral line, which is expensive to fix. What they started doing, especially in all commercial areas, parking lot areas where you have traffic, if you get constant breaks of people running things over, put a swing joint in there. What's nice about it is this is on a barb, this is completely flexible, and these move up and down. So you don't have to dig up and reset. You can literally just dig it up, pull it up, and do it. It's not going to cause breaks on the lines or other things, and they're real lifesavers. So if you're having constant breaks on roadways and sidewalks, it's still a nuisance to dig it up and pull it back up, but it's way less of a nuisance than having the whole area flooded because of a broken irrigation lateral line, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper. So the parts and components, I want to kind of show you the difference. These on the top, these are what hold together your drip line irrigation. You can see this is just kind of a barb. It's put in there, it holds the pipe there. The PVC is actually glued together. And that's why it has such a higher pressure rating than these drip lines. So if your drip lines are constantly being blown out, this is why. I've seen people then add those little steel clamps to the end of it. Those will help hold it, but you're basically just having that pressure go somewhere else to where it'll blow out. It's really time to look at and make sure you have the pressure regulator on that. Big suggestion I would give to everybody is when you meet with your irrigation company or landscape maintenance company, ask them about how to break up the system. Because I had this in community associations where, I have a main line break, and now I have, most of the community down because, if that clock's covering that area, I've got 400 homes down, right? Well, with using isolation ball valves, you can actually isolate breaks. And using an irrigation designer say, okay, where is the optimum place to put these? So I can shut this entire street off and down from the main line, but water the rest of the community. You don't have to put a lot of them in. I'm not saying you have to do it at every single house, but maybe at the ends of each street or each side of the street, putting in an isolation valve where you can bypass it and keep water going to the rest of the streets. Because really the huge cost in irrigation when it goes down like that isn't the cost of the repair, it's the cost of the damage that happens to the turf and to the plant material during that time. So valves, we all know what they are because they're generally the things we get that $200 and $300 bill for that we hate seeing. So that's normally how we see them. These run, like we said, off the main line. A little suggestion that I give to people, I used to be vehemently against it. So there are different types of valves, you know, Hunter, Rainbird, quite a few different types. What I suggest is that you make sure that they're replacing with the same type of valve. And I used to hate it when they would just take these tops off of the valve and replace the guts of them. It's like, you know, I'm not getting my money's worth out of it. Till I started digging into it and seeing that I'm paying so much extra for a repair. These bodies are generally Schedule 80. There's nothing wrong with the body of the PVC. And I'm paying for them to dig this whole thing up, go into the system, open it up. Now I have to flush the whole system. And it's costing me 3 times as much to do, where I could just have them unscrew the top of it, put the new one in. And if that's sufficient, it saves me the money and all the labor of doing it. When I first kind of got into it, I was like, no, dig it all up. And now I'm like, well, if I can save money, especially from my cam days, I was like, well, saves me a couple $100 and I have a large community with hundreds and hundreds of zones. That really starts to add up. So those valves break out into zones. So that's normally how we see them is, you know, zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a picture perfect from the manufactured and photoshopped of what the inside of a valve box looks like. Most of the time what you're going to see is this filled with ants, spiders, and frogs and everything else. But this is a nice clean shot to kind of show you. This is a Hunter 2-wire system, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, the differences. But this is a perfect installation of a valve box. You can see there's enough room on either side to be able to do any valve repairs, like removing this top and replacing the guts. There's room for the solenoids to be removed, and there's plenty of wire. The one thing you don't want to be is short on wire, because if you have to add wire and add more DBRYs and wire nuts to it, you're just adding to the points in the system they can fail. Big thing is, if you have a 2-wire system, these connectors that look like rocket pops from the ice cream trucks, I don't know if ice cream trucks are around anymore. They were back when I was a kid and I liked them. But they're these large couplings, or not couplings, wire nuts that are in silicone. They really help waterproof everything, and we'll show you why. Oh, maybe I won't show you why. Did I delete a slide? Okay. So these DBRYs help waterproof the system and keep it going. And this is the decoder that these two are tied into. So that's the basics of an irrigation valve box. The main line is what comes before the valve. Again, I suggest if you can put in these manifolds, putting in some shutoff valves would be good, you know. Then before your main line, you will have your backflow preventer. There's very few of these ones on the left, but that dog looks so sad I had to add him to the slide. Like, I don't know what's going wrong with his life, but I was like, you know what, you're adorable and this thing's not really relevant, but I still think you should be in a slide somewhere. Mainly what you see are these giant U's that come up that people like to back into, or lawnmowers like to hit. These are the most common ones that you'll see. I have been seeing these double check assembly ones underground, which are great. And I thought this was the greatest thing since sliced bread, till I had sliced bread again after not having it for a few months. No, I'm just kidding. No, till they started installing these in the side between the sidewalk and the road next to oak trees. And 5 years later, the oak tree roots have gone around these. And I don't know if people know this or not, but wind makes oak trees move, and oak tree roots around backflows causes them to break. And we had a rash of these in a community because they'd planted the trees right next to the backflows. So if you do have these underground backflows, just make sure you have some root barrier and things around them to protect against that. Wiring controlling, the C is for controller. I'm surprised they gave us something that easy, which is always nice. There's a few different types. And what we have here is, this is called, on the left, this is a conventional wiring system. So this is going to be called conventional, or multi-strand is what it'll be known by. And it's easy to detect. When you open it up, you'll see all these and tons of wires. Then there is the 2-wire system that uses a decoder. If you open up the back of your system, you'll see a lot less wires. And we're going to go into a little bit of a discussion of the differences and benefits of them. So a conventional wire system is, this wire from the clock goes to this valve out in the field. Number 4 here goes to number 4 there. Number 3 here goes to number 3 there, all the way throughout your property. Now, don't think that because this is green here, that it's going to be green in the field, in the valve box. Unless it's within 100 feet, it's probably not going to be green. It's going to be whatever color wire the guy had in his truck as he was extending that wire out. So it's not always the same color, but it makes wire tracking, if there is a cut here on valve 3, valve 4, 2, and 1 will still work. You'll just know it's on 3 and you have to track the wires. In a 2-wire system, there aren't all those wires in the field. Aptly named 2-wire, there's just 2 wires. And in that, what they install are these things called decoders. So the decoders go out into the field and attach the valve. These are like its own personal phone number, right? So, and that's how I try to explain this, is it's like each valve or each valve grouping has its own phone number. So if you dial a phone number using all 10 proper digits, you get the person you're looking for, right? Well, that's where those DBRYs and all those connectors are so important. If there's any type of break in the system, it doesn't call the phone number properly. It's like missing a digit when we dial a phone number. So if we only dialed 9 digits, we're not going to get the person we're looking for. And that's why it's so important with these, is to make sure the wiring is completely waterproof with DBRYs. I want to say DBPR, but yeah, the DBRYs. The other thing is lightning protection on a 2-wire system. Very important with the 2-wire system to properly have it grounded and have lightning rods, as a ground lightning strike can knock out 20 to 30, I've seen, zones at a time. And you're looking at that point a few $100s a decoder. The lightning rod and really helps reduce that quite a bit. So just some tips on that. Battery operated timers, also known as nodes. I don't know if you're called nodes. I always think of the Noid from Domino's Pizza commercial back in the day, but nodes, as we call them, these are great for starting construction projects and things like that when there isn't power. These are also very useful in the association management world of things. So as installers, I'm gonna put my landscaper hat off here for a second. As a maintenance company, I hate these things. Literally, they're the worst things on earth because they're not connected to the system. We have to remember where they are. We have to mark them on a separate map. You forget where they are. You got to change their batteries out. It's kind of a hassle. But for associations, we have so much going on and so many moving parts as association managers that, we get a break, or there was a line break somewhere and the irrigation system isn't communicating with the valves that are in the parking lot, right? Well, the solution is we have to pull new wire or bore and do all these things that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Landscapers and vendors always think associations just have like an endless pool of money, which we don't. Shockingly, we're not the federal government, even though sometimes the board members think they are, but we're not. These battery operated valves can be a lifesaver on keeping that area working till you can budget properly for it. I always suggest budget properly for it in the next year or two, or the following budget year, but these are great stopgaps. If you have an area that was damaged by construction or a road project that was going on, and you're going to have to tie in everything back to the clock and there's all this work to do, 5 or 6 of these, doesn't cost you nearly as much. And it can buy you the time you need, a couple of years to save up the funding to do so. So just something I like from my CAM days. Rain sensors, yes, they work. We just don't know when that is. I'm just kidding. Yes, the technology on rain sensors has gotten quite a bit better than just a dried out piece of cork, but that's basically the thing that happens. It swells and then says, hey, no more water for you. There's quite a few different ones. There's full out weather stations, which is great, but in a large community, I'm telling you, you're gonna need a couple of them. Beautiful thing about South Florida is it can be pouring on one side of your community and not on the other. And the one I like the most I've been seeing a lot of is a soil moisture sensor. These are great for problematic areas, putting them in the valve so they won't even turn on if the soil is moist there. There's also flow meters and quite a few things now with technology that you can do. For homeowners, there's things like HydroWise that have smart controllers that, base it on local weather conditions and, give them actual control from their iPads or phones. Some different types of water sources we have. Yep.
John, I've got one quick question as we're looking at the sensors. I had a question from Mark. You'd mentioned that these next couple months might be a little bit drier than others. Do you recommend watering every day with the weather that we're going to be having?
So watering every day can kind of, with turf grass especially, and I'll talk on turf grass, shallow watering can actually be detrimental to your turf. So a few times a week with deeper waterings, I personally right now we're on 1 day a week where I'm at. I run what's called a cycle soak. So if I really want to help promote my turf, I'll run it a couple days. But what I'll do is I'll run one cycle early in the evening, what I call early in the evening. No, from 10 o'clock till 4 a.m., let it soak in, and then I'll start my other one from 6 to 9 in the morning. So basically what I'm doing is I'm promoting deeper watering to try and get the roots of my turf as deep as possible. When you end up watering a lot of times, multiple times, but only maybe a half inch, and it stays within that top 3-4 inches of soil, that's all the roots are going to be because they've never had to dig down for it. So frequent shallow watering doesn't necessarily work. There is a caveat to that. If you are on a very coastal area and you have saltwater intrusion or soil that very compact soil where you have a shallow root system, you're going to have to water more frequently. Hope that answers the question.
That was very detailed. Thanks for that.
No.
And I do have a couple questions on water sourcing. So just circle back around when you're done with that section.
Okay. So your different water sources, your city reclaimed water, secret, Bermuda turf does not like reclaimed water, we found out, or at least the ones up here in Central Florida don't. Well water, which is quite common for people to use. Lake draw, which is very common in associations. Just be careful if you guys are getting bryozoa or snails and things like that. Those are normally refilled into the lake and then drawn out. And then city potable. I always joke, well, you gotta be rich to be on city potable, or you just don't have it available. And you have to be on city potable. And at that point, you want to be very, very aggressive with how efficient your system is. All right, so it's time for the quiz. And I'm gonna open up the chat and I'm gonna put in Q1. And Brian, if you can kind of track this. So what we're gonna do, these are gonna be multiple choice questions. Everything was covered in the class. And what we're gonna do, there will be prizes. Our prizes today will include you will get the choice of a 30-ounce teal Arctic cup or a 20-ounce coral cup. We just couldn't handle that much coral in the office if it was 30 ounces, just so you know. So those will be the prizes for today. Oh, did I type in that to the right program? Can everybody see the Q1?
No, it looked like that was a direct message to myself.
All right.
Just make sure that you're sending it to panelists and attendees.
All panelists and attendees. There we go. Thank you, John, for the.
And after these, I do have that water. I've got 2 water sourcing questions.
Okay.
So after these, don't forget about me for the second time now, or else I'm gonna have to.
I will promise not to try to forget about things. All right. So here we go. Click. What are these called? Heads, nozzles, rotors, or backflow? Wow, B from Gabrielle, so quick. All right, so Brian, if you can make sure to get Gabrielle's information. Yes, those are nozzles. And you'll notice, fun little fact, I'm not sure if it's fun for anybody else but me, you'll notice there's different colors on the top of them. That denotes how far they throw. So the all black ones are 15-foot throw, and that's a half nozzle because it has an H. The brown ones are a 12 half. These are a 10 half that are blue, and 8 is green. So now you have a little trivia when you're walking by, you'll know that, hey, that nozzle is, if it's black, it's a 15-foot one, and if it's brown, it's 12. Not that you're going to use that with anybody of your friends, but you could, and you'd be like, I learned it from Jonh Dougherty. So next question. What kind of system is this called? Wait, let me put in Q2. Wow. You guys are so fast. All right, Brian. Whoever got drip first is correct.
I don't like this. I'd rather find out if I get it right. I would always work.
All right, what kind of spacing is this called? Wow, someone yes, it's square. I can't even get my funny stuff out. Like I can't get circular, confusing, or Celtic or Celtic, wherever you're from. All right. Q4 is going to be, all right. Come on, clicker, there you go. What type of controller is this? Yes, conventional, Kim. It is conventional. Looks like Kim was the first one on that, Brian. And we're gonna go to Q5. I should have like music, right? I need Lisa to sing during these times. All right, question number 5. Proper spacing for drip line, which one? 12 to 16, wow, people are going in fast. Don't even need my multiple choice. You guys are on it. Brian, make sure we don't get any double winners. It'll have to go next. You can't, I appreciate those who are so fast on this, but you can't win all the cups. We have to share, or maybe you can. All right, what is this called? Yes, backflow. Yep. It is a backflow. I personally like the term expensive, but I guess that it's true, but not what it's actually called. All right, well, that's all I have for this class. I'm going to take a quick break, and then everybody else will talk to you about things not to do with irrigation, or maybe about irrigation. Oh, no, Jonathan, you had questions. Sorry. See, I forgot.
Two real quick ones. So I've had one, ultimately it's they're talking about reclaimed water. How often should the city department clean out the gate valve filters that feed the irrigation for the property?
That's a good question. It'll depend on how dirty the water is. So what I always go by is how much my system's getting clogged up. And if I have scrubber valves on the system, how many times I'm replacing them. So if you're getting problems with your system, I would call the city out and say, hey, we're starting to get some issues, and have them go out there to do it.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. And then I've got another, again, about reclaimed irrigation. It's a larger community. They had a well, and they're thinking about reclaiming the well and installing the system in Miami Shores. They're 2 blocks from the bay, and they're worried about rising sea levels. Should that have any effect on their decision to install that well?
Yeah, definitely talk to the well guys on that. So we had a project that was literally on a peninsula right there in Anne Marie Island area. They were able to punch in 2 wells. And what we did is we ran monthly salinity tests on it. So what I do is run what they have now in that well, see what the salinity is, and send it to a lab. There's a bunch of water testing places, and do it for a few months, because what you want to do is you want to make sure if it's pulling from an aquifer that you're not just taking these in summer. Because if you're taking it in summer and we're getting plenty of rain, those might fill back up. You want to take these in summer and winter. So now would be a good time to see what those salt levels are. And then, you'll know whether you're good for it or not. Those well guys, they are the trickiest people on earth. They may seem like they don't know anything, but most of those well people have been doing this so long, they can tell you whether you're going to be good or not on it. But I always kind of check with a salt test.
Perfect. Well, thanks for that, John. That's all that I had for now. And I've got a couple questions here for sponsors. Lisa, I'd like to start with you. How can communities undertake irrigation projects like this without taking out an assessment?
Well, depending on the size of the project and the amount that they need, they could implement a special assessment, but they don't want to do that. We could provide financing. Our minimum loan amount is 100,000, but maybe the irrigation project is maybe 75, but there might be other projects that the association needs to do, whether it be maybe retrofitting with elevator, with upgrades, with plumbing upgrades, with just painting, etc. So our minimum loan amount is 100,000, so they could get the financing that they may need to be able to move forward with that project. And what we like to do is we like to look at 3 key financials. We like to look at a balance sheet, an income statement, and aging. From there, then we can determine whether or not we're able to provide different financing for them for their projects. I'm happy to discuss more, and each association is unique. So you may not think your association qualifies, but you might be able to. So it all depends.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Jimmy, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Perfect. I can, yes. I was wondering, how can LM Funding help communities with collections issues and that sort of thing?
Well, especially if they don't qualify to get Lisa's great rates at the bank, then because of delinquency, we can help with that. You can call us up. We can sit down together, get your AR, get your deck page, and see what we can do for you for the statutes and with your deck. We fund, again, we can give you some monies up front for your projects if you are falling behind on your delinquency, and then certainly get the ARs back into a healthy state by collecting. And again, you're not going to spend any additional monies on the attorney's fees and costs. We cover all of those fees and costs, even if there's not a collection to be done, to be had because of bankruptcy or bank foreclosure. We'll still cover all those costs for the association. So you're not going to be spending good money after bad.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that. Yeah, it's really, really helpful. So thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Looks like we've lost a couple of our sponsors throughout, but Carmelo, I was hoping that you could answer a couple questions. You were talking about seawalls, that sort of thing. I mean, have you had a situation where, United Professional Engineering, there's a palm tree or something in the way of like a seawall that's kind of made it buckle or something along those lines?
Yeah, sometimes it does happen, and sometimes the trees have to be cut out. The roots, it happens a lot of times inland, where roots up lift sidewalks and so on. We're dealing with one project right now, actually, where there's about 3.5 miles of site wall where trees have lifted the precast walls, and we had to hire an arborist. We did an assessment of 3.5 miles of wall, and we brought in an arborist to deal with some of those are protected live oaks that you just can't cut down, so it becomes complicated. Of course, we handle more of the structural side, but a lot of times you have to bring in a couple of different consultants. And sometimes we coordinate that, sometimes we don't. But yeah, we have dealt with that, Jonathan, and sometimes the trees have to be removed if they're affecting the structure. So.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I've got a question for Peggy. We're talking about sprinklers and if everything goes exactly to plan, we shouldn't have any situations where there's water intrusion within a community. But Peggy, what happens if there is an issue, there is a leak or some intrusion? Maybe there's a main break that's just a little bit too close to a property. What happens in that situation, and how can Pure Clean help?
Okay, well, thank you for that question. Basically, we have to shut down the source immediately, of course. And the big concern there is going to be the mold after the fact and coming into the building. So we would have to do a moisture check and a mold check on whatever area of the building. If you're talking about condominium high rise, I'm going to guess. And then, just make sure that whatever the repair is, with the involvement of the repair, that it definitely is, going to not happen again to where it would creep into the building, because the mold remediation process, depending on how far around the building, would need to be addressed to dry out. And also, depending on the amount, it could be sizable enough to do an insurance claim, which we would be able to handle for them. But if it's not, if the water's not shut off almost immediately, then, it could be quite a bit of money out of pocket. So it just depends on the situation, but definitely get the water shut off and then get us in for a mold evaluation.
Absolutely. And one of the nice things that Vinteum offers, if there is a situation where there is a leak or water intrusion in a community, it could be submitted, by a resident. They're walking around the community, they see, a lot of standing water near a building. They could go ahead and report that, snap a photo right from their smartphone, iOS or Android, and then upload that into the system, alerting the administration of those issues. In addition, we also could use the same tools for those visual inspections. John was talking about how important it is to see, hey, is this patch of grass dead, or is there a geyser in the middle of a field where there's not supposed to be, where there's been a sprinkler break. Well, and those are the exact same, those are the exact situations where it's really useful to have a mobile phone where you're connected to your community. You could submit that ticket, as well as access things like documents, resident lists. You could reserve different amenities all from your phone as a resident. And you could do the same as a property manager. You're walking around the property, you could go ahead and make note of all of these landscaping related issues or other issues. So if you have any questions with that, feel free to reach out, VintiumSoftware.com. And the next segment we're going to be chatting with John about is landscaping service agreements, do's and don'ts. And Peggy, you want to take it from here?
Yes, I also wanted to interject about PureClean's agreements. It's really good. I have one here. I don't know if you can see it too well, but we have what we call a master agreement that we recommend that all the condominiums in particular put into place. It's an agreement that spells out all the various things that arise that you might have a question at the time of the disaster. So, you want to know up front things like, what are the exact services available, and what are the warranties, besides the payment and the insurance proceeds and things like that. But it's good to have your agreement in place, which means the board would approve it. You would have your attorney take a look at it. And then when something happens, you have a reliable company to turn to already on contract, and you lose no time by doing so. That's the thing. Does anyone else, other sponsors, want to speak about your agreements that you have? Any particular features? Okay.
Fantastic thing with Vinteum is we don't have any agreements. It's a month-to-month agreement. So
okay.
We make it easy.
Okay. Anyone else? No?
With LM funding, our agreement, we have a purchase agreement, and there's not any contract or in term or termination. You have units you want to send over, you send them. If you don't send them over, then you don't send them over. So there's no term or termination agreement that way, or contract in any way of that.
Okay.
Also for the indemnification, we protect the association 100% in the event that there's anything that slips through the cracks and to indemnify the association. So the attorneys that we use, they will push very, very hard. And if anything should come back, any lawsuit or something like that, we're covering those costs in the collection field.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next hour, which is landscape service agreements, do's and don'ts. Again, if you want to ask a question, please put it into the chat. I'll turn this back over to John.
All right, I'm back. I'm sorry for you that have stayed. This one is not state required, so it's on your own. The other one was a CEU course, so I understand having to listen to my voice. So we are going to get to landscape service agreement do's and don'ts. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an attorney spokesperson. I do not work for 411 Payne. I'm just going through the things that are kind of hassles when I was a CAM and seeing it from the landscape side of view also. I'm just going to share those with you guys. So with no further ado, which I can't spell either of those words. So what we're going to go over is the general maintenance, fertilization. We're going to talk about, what to include in there on fertilization, irrigation, tree pruning, mulch, annual flowers, subcontractors, consultants, and questions to ask your contractor. This is actually Weston Park, one of the projects we do down in Southeast Florida. All right, so real quick, how landscape projects are bids are created. At least on our end, generally we do everything via square footage. And I think that's an important thing to ask your contractors, like, hey, how do you know the price you're getting is correct? We get the square footage of beds, turf type, those types of things. I just make sure to be asking those questions of like, okay, how did you come up with what we're going to come to an agreement with on price? You can see the details in which, how we get ours. Many people use the same type of programming. Talking about turf care is generally your mowing services. Ornamental and bed services are your pruning of your ornamentals and your weeds in the beds. So most often I see things like, you're going to mow the turf 38 to 42 times, zoysia 38 to 42 times, bahia is going to be 20 to 36, pruning is going to be on, 8 to 12 times, which is a 6 or 4 week rotation. One thing I try to always tell people is this is one of those things of it's an expectation. It isn't just a service. Hey, we cut the grass. How much labor does it take to cut that grass? Well, that's not our job to have. Like, I don't really care if they put, we're going to have 4 people there. Well, what if 4 people can't cover it? So one of the specs that the mall gave us, Mall at Millennia that we take care of up in Orlando, I thought was really good for associations, was sufficient labor to maintain the landscape areas as described in the specifications. So we could put that we're going to have 4 people there. If it takes 6, it doesn't matter. So also that we would have sufficient supervision to ensure the contract specifications and standards are being properly followed. That's another good one that I saw. Instead of just having, hey, this is how many mows and things that we want. When it comes to the labor and whatnot on the job, that's the contractor's responsibility to fulfill the specifications. I thought that was a really good one. Ask for a plan. One of the big things I always saw was, oh, we're going to do whatever it takes. Like David Moss Toyota up in Orlando. If you guys haven't seen him, he always does this thing. He's pretty funny. I like David Moss Toyota. But doing whatever it takes doesn't mean you're going to do it well. I mean, I appreciate that people try to do well. I always ask them for a plan. Like, I want to see, all right, we're going to award you this contract. We're in the final negotiation portion. Show me how you're going to get the mowing, pruning, and all that kind of stuff done. Send me a schedule or a breakout of how the crews are going to be broken out with the account manager and things like that. Who oversees the irrigation tax? Is it the account manager or the irrigation manager? Who reports to who? And on large projects, this is so important because as the association manager and as board members, you're not paid to run the landscaping company. The landscaping company is. So you don't want to have to deal with the account manager and the irrigation manager and the fertilization and pest manager. You want to make sure you're fixing in there that you have one point of contact and that person's gathering all that information for you and getting it to you. Because what you don't want to have is any type of finger pointing with that, because not only does that happen when those types of services are done outside of the landscape maintenance agreement, but it can also happen internally. Again, making sure to have that sufficient labor to maintain the landscape areas. I don't care if this map and if this org chart says, oh, you're going to have 12 people. It's to complete the job. That's what the contract is. It is not for a number of people. You know, if your people aren't good enough to get it done, then you need to get more people. So I thought that was a pretty good one. Fertilization. This is a big thing we deal with. So I see all the time specs that go, we want 4 fertilizations, we want 6 fertilizations, we want 3 fertilizations. I'm going to show you some specs that are pretty plain, but really kind of dive into the fact of it's the contractor's responsibility. The turfgrass fertilization rule follows as this, that you can do an application of up to 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet when applying fertilizer in the spring or summer if it is a fertilizer using that has at least 65% controlled release nitrogen. Now, if you are using a water soluble source, which is basically fast release, not slow release, no more than 0.7 pounds of quick release per N can be applied at any one time. So there's a huge discrepancy there in 2 pounds and 0.7 pounds. And that's what will change the frequency and how much you should be speccing to fertilize. And that's why I say to associations, you shouldn't really be speccing how many times you fertilize. I like the specs I saw that were lawn shall be fertilized as warranted with a commercial fertilizer. The number of applications will be dependent on the type of nitrogen used, which is important because remember we went over that water soluble or the slow release and the fast release fertilizer and the type of turf grass. So if you spec in there, hey, we want 3 fertilizations, well, they do 3 fertilizations at 0.7 pounds with fast release, you're not going to get a good product. They do 3 fertilizations with 2 pounds with 65% slow release, you're going to have a better product. A contractor will provide control of turf damaging insects using federal and state registered insect control products as needed to prevent or mitigate turf damage. You'd be surprised how many times I see people put things in contracts. They're like, we want you to take care of this, this, and this. I'm like, okay, well, what about the other 57 bugs you're going to get? I think when you start to make mention of specific things, and of course, talk to your attorney, it kind of creates this gray area of, well, you mentioned these 10, but you didn't mention these 57. So was it only these 10? And then put in the exclusions of things that can't be controlled, like signal grass and torpedo grass and crabgrass and things like that. So talking about fertility, different types of turf in different areas require different amounts of product, nitrogen to keep them green and healthy. So in Central Florida for zoysia grass, you're looking at 2 to 4 pounds per year. In South Florida, you're looking at 2.5 to 4.5. Well, what does that mean when it comes to number of applications? So if you did a pound of nitrogen per year or per application, well, if you use the 0.7, which is the max you could use with what I would call a lower grade fertilizer, a non-custom grade fertilizer, you'd have to do 5.7 apps to get to the 4 pounds of nitrogen per year. But if you were using a 65% to 35%, 65% slow release and 35% fast release, you'd only need 3 applications in Central Florida. Same thing in South Florida. And this is probably why people say, well, we fertilized it 5 times down in South Florida. I don't understand why it's not green. Well, it might not be the number of applications. It might be what's being applied. And that's where I'd really dig in on this, is because, you know, here we have, to get to that 4.5 pounds in South Florida, you need 6.5 applications of that fertilizer to do so, opposed to if you used a, 65% slow release and 35% fast release, you'd only need 3. So if you did 3 or 4 of the slow release, you'd get a much better product. This other way, you're looking at, you're going to have to fertilize 7 times almost to get the same amount of nitrogen down. Same thing with St. Augustine. In Central Florida, we're at 2 to 5 pounds. South Florida, 4 to 6 pounds. And this is where it gets a little bit scary, of where you know the person has applied, the contractor has applied the product. But you look in Central Florida, to get that 5 pounds of N of nitrogen, 7 applications if you're using water insoluble nitrogen at the legal limit of 0.7 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Whereas if you're using, and this isn't even at the full 2 pounds, this is just at 1.4 of the water insoluble or slow release, you're looking at just under 4 applications. You know, South Florida, same thing. Now you're looking at 8.6, almost 9 applications of fertilizer if you're using a lower grade fertilizer. And that's why I say it depends on the nitrogen source and the turf type. So writing specs to say we can have the same spec that we're going to fertilize 5 times, but if I fertilize 5 times with this product, hey, it's going to be a lot better. If I fertilize 5 times with the 0.7 product, it's not going to work as well. Same thing, Bermuda grass. My goodness, with Bermuda grass, as hungry as it is, we're looking, the difference is, you know, 8 to 10 times, whether you live in Central Florida or South Florida, you're going to have to fertilize, or, you know, 4 or 5 times using a higher grade fertilizer product. And again, this is where I see the biggest discrepancy in the perception of, well, we did the job, we fertilized it. This isn't a check the box thing when it comes to landscape. The residents that we work with, they expect a good product. They want to know the grass is going to be green. If we say, well, you said 4 times, we did 4 times, that can kind of be a dangerous spec. I always try to set the expectations that it's about performance and results. When I was a CAM, the goal of the turf program is to deliver healthy turf. It is not to check a box that we did so many applications. And that's the dangers when you get into some of those. So I always try to set that expectation. And that's why I love that spec of that the lawn shall be fertilized as warranted with a commercial fertilizer. The number of applications will be dependent on the type of nitrogen used. So you're covered on how many applications on that end, whether you're using 0.7 with a completely water soluble or water insoluble, and then also with the different types of turf grass. Hopefully that makes sense. John, are there any questions?
Not at this point. A couple questions. We do have somebody that would love a copy of your landscape agreements. So maybe that's something that we could send. And I do have a question from Alex. What are the pros and cons for irrigation being part of the total landscape package? You know, one-stop shop versus using separate suppliers.
That is great. I'm going to get to that one in a minute. So yeah, I have that in. That is a great question. I'll show you the pros and cons of that. Perfect. All right. Ornamental palms. So your standard fertilization for, you know, your viburnums and things like that are going to be 2 to 3 times. Your flowering shrubs like hibiscus are going to be 3 to 4 times. Sable palms and Washingtonians, you don't really need to fertilize them. Queens and foxtails are very heavy feeders. Foxtail palms can go yellow on you in about 3 to 4 months. Pretty darn quick, and they love to do it during summer when we're getting all that rain and where a lot of us have restrictions on what we can apply. So you need to make sure as soon as those restrictions are over that you're applying your palm fertilizer from October to May 1st or May 31st, depending where you're at, to get them as green and as much as you can hold them over through summer. The other thing is Medjool and Canary palms and Sylvesters, anything in those Phoenix families, make sure you have a plan for those. They are expensive, or people also refer to them as pineapple palms. So I like the fact that trees and shrubs and ground covers should be inspected quarterly and fertilized as warranted to promote optimal healthy growth of the plant. Palms should be fertilized at least 3 times a year with fertilizer formula designed specifically for palms. Contractor to furnish a proposed fertilization program with contract that indicates formulation rates and timings of applications. So with those, you're pretty well covered on what the expectation is and that they're submitting a plan. If you do have specialty palms on your project, and I generally ask for this once you're negotiating with someone on a landscape contract, I don't generally try to get all this stuff from every bidder because you want to really partner with someone on doing the right thing and not someone who's just trying to win a bid. but I asked for a plan for the specialty palms. And then I also love to ask, is there something more we should be doing? Because the last thing I want to do be like, well, we got this contract, but you didn't tell me we should be, preparing for lethal bronzing or something like that. So what else is it that we could be doing to make sure to properly protect our trees? Yeah, I hate this one. Excuse me, but this is a gray area of the contract. Like, well, this is kind of one of those gray areas. One of the least fun conversations I ever get to have. So we like to have things as up in the open as possible. So that one goes away. Lethal bronzing. It's time to start addressing these in our contracts and on our properties. Back in 2008, we didn't have much problems with lethal bronzing. It was mainly in that Hillsborough, Manatee area. By 2013, it spread to a good portion of the state, and now it's just about everywhere. Up in Central Florida, we're losing Phoenix palms left and right. You go down I-4, 429, there's probably 30% of them that are dying out because of lethal bronzing. The good news is it is preventable. Lethal bronzing is very similar to lethal yellowing that we fought with coconut palms years ago. So you can treat them preventatively. These are generally the signs of lethal bronzing, is you'll start to get that browning on the bottom, the heads may fall out of them. The weird thing that it is with lethal bronzing is since it's spread by a leafhopper, it's not generally that, okay, so these 3 palms next to it are going to get it. It might be 5 palms down that the leafhopper actually jumps on, feeds on, and spreads the disease. So if you do have canary palms or Phoenix or Sylvesters, and especially in those that, not everybody has the budget for it to do everywhere, but I look at my monument signs and stuff on pool decks. Stuff on pool decks is so expensive to remove, and if you want to replace it, craning stuff in. So I would start with those and get those on a program. The products for it aren't that expensive. It's just the time to actually apply the product, because it has to be injected into the tree. So you can prevent it by using tetracycline. This is actually Cal Leggett, our director of agronomy. He put together a whole video for our internal team of how to properly apply and treat for lethal bronzing. So the University of Florida suggests every 3 months. If you get it as part of your fertilization program, it's not going to be a huge increase generally to your contracted price unless you have like 50 of those palm trees. Then it can get pretty pricey. But when you're looking at the cost of these trees being in the thousands and thousands of dollars, if you start to lose 1 or 2 of them, it pays for itself really quick. Hire an arborist if you're going to be looking for lethal bronzing or some palm issues. This was one where a product was improperly used. It looks like it was the ArborJet product that was used, that they overpressurized it. You can see, and this is one grouping of 3 Christmas palms that you can see the swelling on, and you can actually see here the injection point and the port. This is on hundreds, and when I mean hundreds, probably closer to thousands of trees throughout the property, because someone got a new toy, thought they knew how to use it, and didn't know. Thing with palm trees is they're not like regular trees. They don't have the tree rings and things that we think of. These are vascular bundles like straws, so you can cause some real damage to them. And always ask for references with arbor care, with anything. All right, irrigation wet checks. We're gonna get to that question that we talked about, it seems like 3 years ago, about whether you should do it in-house or not. Monthly wet checks are, what we generally suggest. Check each clock for proper programming and operation. It's important to have that. Make sure that you have it in your contract that they're checking the rain sensor, that they're running each zone long enough to fully evaluate the head coverage and the operation, that cleaning out plug nozzles is part of the contract, cleaning out view filters. So view filters are the ones on the lines that you generally above ground in a U. adjust heads for proper coverage. You can also take that filters if you have drip lines for those, and adjust the clock seasonally. Here's the thing, is clock timing adjustment included in your contract or not? You don't know, unless you have it written in there. And, you know, are you going to want a written report to the management company of any changes to those irrigation controllers? And then I like the spec that I saw that was, where practical, every effort should be made to schedule irrigation late at night or early in the morning in order to minimize interference with vehicles or pedestrian traffic. Up in Central Florida, we have quite a few people that, you know, it's a more of a working class area. So there's a lot of people parked out on the street. Watering their cars isn't the best thing on earth. One thing you can ask for, if as you get to the final negotiations, especially in large communities, I hate surprises unless it's like my birthday or something. And if you want to buy me anything green, May 9th is my birthday, just saying. I'm sure Brian has my address. Anyways, I just don't like surprises. So you don't need an irrigation list for absolutely everything you're going to get, right? But you need it for those things you're going to use the most often. Some people go through this length and they have hundreds and 100+ things on there. These are the most popular things we replace on associations: rotors, 6-inch pop-ups, 12-inch pop-ups, shrub risers. We do nozzles that are fixed nozzles and MP rotator nozzles. Decoders, you're getting single station, dual station are the most common. Valves most common that we do are 1.5 to 2-inch valves. Solenoids are the AC and DC. Get your labor rate in the contract. Why not? Get a guaranteed labor rate. When it says in a contract, hey, you know, it'll be additional billed at time and material for irrigation. Okay, what's the time? You know, it's a good question, because some contracts are 45, some are 65. If there's nothing in there, what if it's 105? You wouldn't know. So I think that's a good one to get in there. Irrigation technician. This is somewhere where, you know, there's an irrigation labor person who's cleaning out heads, doing things like that. You want to pay more, and I know this sounds dumb, but you want to pay more for your irrigation technician because they do things faster than the regular irrigation guys. When you're doing wire tracking and programming, if you have someone who can do it faster, it costs you less. So anytime you have wire tracking, programming, or upgrades to the system, you want to define that that's be done by, you know, a technician or supervisor, not just done by, you know, the irrigation laborer who thinks he knows how to use wire tracking. Key factor of success, I would say, is that a complete evaluation is done in the first 60 days. That's not just from my CAM side, but from the landscape side. You know, doing this over 20 years, when we've had failures on jobs to not start jobs great, it's when we haven't done a complete evaluation the first 60 days, or work with the contractor that's on site over the next 60 days of getting that evaluation done. Things to look for, and these are the red flags we look for on jobs. What we're looking for is, you know, here's a node on a 2-wire system. It's not waterproofed and it's sitting in water. So what ends up happening is it actually starts to corrode, and which disrupts the signal. And we've had this on multiple sites where we take over. The other thing is, I just take a look at the electrical panels. I mean, here you can see this is completely open. You'd be surprised how much damage lizards and fire ants cause to irrigation systems and controllers. We've had them blow out, you know, $2,500 controllers because they build a nest in there because we get a bunch of rain. They come out of the, you know, dirt and they go, you know what, we can just build a nest in this thing. If you have an irrigation panel that has an outlet and it's completely open, and these are red flags when you see stuff open like this, might be time to talk to your irrigation contractor. DBR-wise on a 2-wire system. Oh, there's that slide I was looking for on my irrigation one. Must have stole it for here. DBR-wise, what it is, they use the wire nuts that tie the wires together, and then they're put in this silicone gel and then snapshot, which completely waterproofs them. And that's what you need with that decoder, because as we discussed in the irrigation portion, that's like calling a phone number, right? So you're calling a phone number. If you miss one of the digits, the irrigation zone isn't going to turn on. That's what they look like installed. Irrigation repairs in contract. So the best ways I've seen them done is irrigation from the valve out. And the minor repairs that can be done, which are lateral lines, heads, bubblers, things like that. Major repairs from back valve back should be built, shall be billed separately and requires written approval from the manager. And any damages obviously caused by the contractor should be paid by them and replaced by them. So the reason I say that is, you know, with minor repairs, and it's becoming quite common that people are including them in, you know, if you're getting in a finger pointing, you know, discussion of, all right, well, who really broke the head? Was it the car? Was it the lawnmower? Is it the fact that the head isn't, you know, working properly? If you have a good contractor and you've been working with them for years and you like your contractor, maybe just sit down with them and say, hey, over the last year, we spent $15,000 on irrigation repairs. We would like to basically fix that into the contract over the next 12 months, and you just fix the repairs. You get a reduction in paperwork. We know you're just doing the system, but you still need to submit all the reports of what's been done. We've seen that work pretty successfully. Example of major repairs would be clocks, lateral lines, or clocks, main lines, and valves. Definitely keep your wells and pumps off that, because I don't know how anybody would price that out. And that's one of my major concerns with, if you put major repairs into a maintenance contract that is all together, one of the problems is, how are they estimating what's going to break over those years? How are they going to document all those repairs? What do you do with acts of God or nature, depending which one you believe in? And verification of repairs. Like, now who's responsible for verifying that you're doing the things that nobody knows whether you have to do or not? So the minor repairs, we know if the heads are broken or not. We're right now getting ready to take over a project where the system's been down, about a third of it's been down for probably 3-4 months, because it's all part of their irrigation repair, and they decided not to do it because it would cost them money. Accountability. Now, finally, Jonathan, I got back long way round to the question of accountability. My experience personally has not been great, either on the CAM end or on the landscape end, when multiple contractors are on a job. I've had it one time in Orlando where it worked somewhat good with a subcontractor, but that was on the fertilization and pest end, which is a little bit different. When it comes to irrigation, it's generally a battle because there's two people trying to do two different things. Generally, irrigation company is a water management company and trying to save water. And hopefully my video plays here. Let's see. This is an example of a job that we had that in 2019, we did all the irrigation. That's what you're seeing now. 2020, this is the drone footage that we have. In 2020, this is what the turf turned to when we had an outside contractor. They saved a lot of money in water, but we lost a lot of turf and a lot of the overall look of the community. You can see where we had water, it was nice and green. Where we didn't, it browned out pretty quick. And that's what the danger is. We got into it with, between the management company, us, and the water people. The water management company, they were saying, hey, the next thing I'm going to show is the plant health. This drone footage is cool. It uses infrared technology, so you can actually see how dense the foliage is. It's crazy when you see that green go to red. It feels like it should be Christmas, but it's a Christmas of pure coal being delivered at that point when you have that much dead turf. But what it became is they stood by their side of doing the right thing and managing the water and reducing the water that they used. We were saying, well, this is something that is has a shallow root system. You have salinity issues. You have all these things. You have to water it more often than what you guys are doing. And after a year, it proved out we were right. But being right did not feel good when the property looked like that. So I'm not a huge fan of it. I think Fert and Pest can work that way because you can have a solid subcontractor working with your landscape provider. Irrigation, I don't like doing it that way. So I hope that answers the question, John.
It does, thanks.
Palm pruning. So palm pruning is done primarily for aesthetic purposes. That's one thing we need to realize. So as an arborist, like, I understand we prune palms because we want to get the coconuts down and things like that, but it is purely for aesthetics. So we put them on a schedule commercially because it makes sense, not because it's the right thing for the palm tree. Some palms are going to require more and less frequency, and that's what I would stipulate in your contracts is exactly which palms those are. The ones that cause the most, can cause the most damage are going to be your coconut palms, not doing those twice a year because of their fruiting, and also any of your phoenix palms. Any of your phoenix palms generally get fruit, can cause messes on pool decks and things like that. Your Washingtonian palms, and I hear this from people that are like, well, there's a bunch of dead on it, my tree's dying. I was like, well, your tree's not dying. Washingtonian palms are bearded palms. You're mainly just pruning them for the aesthetics of them. And from that point, I kind of look at it as a budgetary thing of, all right, do we really need to prune them twice if they're in the back 40? Big thing to put in your specs though when it comes to palm pruning is the use of climbing spikes is prohibited on all palm trees. If someone does have to use climbing spikes, it has to be written, approved by the association in writing. The specs we like are palms be pruned at 9 and 3, like on a watch or a clock. And the reason we say the spikes, this is an example on a coconut palm. These wounds will never heal on this tree. Since these are monocots, and like we discussed before, they're like a bunch of straws all together, those holes will only get bigger over time. And there was really no reason to spike that tree. There's a sidewalk right there and a road right there. They could have used a lift. I would definitely stipulate in there that all palm pruning should be done without spikes, and that if it does need to be done, it needs to be approved by the association. Because how are you going to take the spikes out of the tree? I mean, you can't take the damage away once it's done. And that's a crucial part. And the reason we like palm trees is they're pretty, and having holes all over them is not the best. And those holes will get bigger with time. So I think I don't see that spec a lot in contracts when it comes to palm pruning. They just assume we're going to do it the right way. But it's something I would definitely include as a CAM. Also, documentation of trees. You know, I always say consider adding into your specs, you know, a tree survey, or having it done via high resolution drone like we use, or there's also tree survey software that's out there. These are very useful to have after hurricanes. So you only have to do it once, it's there, you do it, you know, once a year, kind of update it and kind of go from there. I think these are very important things that we're not utilizing technology in the association world as much as we could to protect ourselves when we do have damage to our properties from hurricanes. Because we all know the one tree we're going to miss replacing is that one homeowner who goes to every board meeting who says there's a conspiracy against them. It's a one person we miss. So during storms, when we end up missing hundreds, if not thousands of trees, we're able to go through and say, okay, is that tree still there? Yes or no? And then get a list and be able to replace them.
Hey John, I've got a question here about irrigation tools, about the clocks. So a little bit off topic here, but Suzanne asked about hunter clocks. Their vendor said that they should change all hunter clocks to rainbirds after the warranty ended with hunter ones. What are your thoughts on these clocks as a manufacturer?
Wow, that's an odd statement. So I'm going to assume they're 2-wire systems. So the clock and controllers generally operate the same way. It's kind of like Ford and Chevy, right? Some guys love Ford, some guys love Chevy. We install a lot of both. We were certified in Hunter and Rainbird for install. Some people prefer the Rainbird product. Some people prefer the Hunter. There's nothing wrong with the Hunter products. What I always say, if someone wants you to do a massive overhaul like that, call the manufacturer. Say, hey, we're thinking of doing this. What do you think? What are we not doing wrong? Because it might be that the vendor doesn't know how to properly use the system. and they might be using a Hunter ACC and they're used to other types of clocks with Rainbird and the Rainbird IQ system. But Hunter has everything Rainbird has, and Rainbird has everything Hunter has. It's like Ford and Chevy. I don't know if I'd go through the cost of replacing all the controllers with it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
Most times what you're getting with that too is those wiring connections. And what I would do is look at some of the valve boxes and see if there are those DBRYs, those large connectors in all of them. Because if you're getting communication issues, that's probably where it's coming from, not the controller. So anyways, yeah, great question. Crepe myrtle pruning. All right, long story short, if a tree's in the right place, it shouldn't require a lot of pruning. For the most part, this is what we see happen to crepes. We should not do this. It's called crepe murder. If you like doing it to your crepes, I'm sorry, it's mean to do, don't do it. This is what crepes should look like when they're pruned, thinned out, removing crossing branches and tipping them, if you even do that. We've done some tests on our communities on large roadways and what, we've seen no flowering difference on trees we haven't pruned in 5 years versus the other. The specs I like for crepe myrtles, if you're going to put them pruning into it, is that if necessary for doing crepes, prune for safety may be done at any time. We want to make sure we have that in our contracts. Hey, there's no limitation on pruning something for safety. This may involve removing a damaged branch, weak branches, or pruning lower limbs for pedestrian or vehicle clearance and visibility. I think that we can all agree on that. Pruning should be to improve the plant structure, redirect growth, or alter the plant shape and appearance could occur when the plant's leaf is leafless and dormant, typically in December through February. That's when you generally want to prune your crepe myrtles. John, I can turn this to a PDF so you can send it out to everybody too. So, because I know who wants to write down this much wording. So it's best to do it when it doesn't have leaves on it and it is dormant. One things I pulled from the University of Florida's Extension Service site was crepe myrtle selected to match landscape site require little or no pruning. A crepe myrtle that requires routine pruning to fit in its surroundings should be considered for replacement with a smaller maturing cultivar. So you might also just have the wrong crepe or the wrong plant in that place, especially if you're having to prune all the time. So good, I'm done with that and nobody murdered me. That's great. Mm-hmm. Key factors in having great flower displays. This is one of the things we get with associations is, you know, having a plan is the key to this whole thing. And, you know, replacing the soil at least once a year, having your annual care under the maintenance program. The reason I say that is then we can plan for it because we know every quarter it's coming, we know we're getting paid for it, and it's easy to do. The warranty provision, make sure there's one in there for you. And schedule your rotations 3 to 4 a year. If you're doing 2 or 3 rotations, you're not going to get the most out of it. I hate to say it, but most times when we pull flowers out, I like to pull them out right after they've kind of peaked and they're going. They're just starting to go. That's when we pull them out. Most people go, you pulled them out at their peak. Yeah, because I didn't want them to crash. And then everybody go, hey, they crashed in the last 2 weeks. But having a schedule and getting the right plants in there. 1 second, I froze up for a second. There we go. I got to take this pen thing off. All right. In doing that, when you have it in contract, it allows us to, as a contractor, to grow them specifically for you or work with the nurseries that do so. Timely install them. You also get your price guaranteed in it, and you get a better selection because we're contract growing them. The warranty is then taken care of because it's in the contract, and you get a higher quality display of flowers. Common mulch types, I'll try to go through this one quick. Brown cypress, cocoa mulch, and gold mulch and pine bark are most widely used. Mulch can be done via within your contract or with your contractor or outside, and you can bid it out each year. There are pros and cons to both. Quite honestly, as a maintenance contractor, we don't care. It's not a huge margin item for us. So if a community wants to go out and have a mulch contractor do it, that's great. Doesn't really bother us that much. The one thing I caution on that is what ends up happening more often than not, and what I saw from the CAM end, is when we do that, the mulch contractor eventually starts ratcheting up how much mulch is going, and the price keeps going up and up, and they're not tied in to losing anything else. That always goes to my thing when it comes to irrigation and horticulture in your contract. When you have everything kind of tied in, the contractor is more incentivized to make all pieces work because he loses the whole pie if he doesn't. So that's one of the benefits I've seen. Some real large associations, they subcontract it out directly themselves, and that works also. We've had people ask, what can I change out pine bark, since it's not a sustainable resource as much as the shredded mulches are. So we've been recommending we've done, as pine bark gets thinner, is to be able to top dress it with cocoa brown mulch and eventually slowly replace it without, it's such an expense to rip out all the mulch and put in new mulch. So we've actually been going over the top with cocoa brown. Might be an alternative for you guys.
Hey, John, I've got a question from Alex. Experience with spraying bulk mulch. What are your thoughts there?
Great for associations and common grounds, horrible for apartment complexes. That would be, no, it depends on your vendor. So blowing in mulch is very effective. You just want to make sure you have the right company, because, when they're blowing around screen lanais, if they're using too much velocity, it creates a lot of dust. And then that dust gets over everybody's porches. But if you have a good mulch blowing vendor, we have quite a few that we've worked with. It works really well and reduces your cost. The per bag price is nice, but the problem is if those guys go heavy in the beginning, which they generally do, they run out of mulch and then they're coming back to you later, is what I've seen in my experience.
And is there any evidence that it's too fine of a mulch?
No, you can have the different types done. So that just depends what you have blown in. They can do pine bark, large or mini, and they can also do the shredded brown. And that will really depend on your mulch vendor, where they get it from, and then the velocity that the machine's going.
Perfect. Okay, thanks.
Design capabilities, I've got like 5 minutes. I'm going to run through this. Design capabilities, I always say, personally in-house, we have 3 landscape architects. If you don't have, if your company doesn't, generally try to have one or a consultant that can help you when you're doing master planning. Doing this stuff just on the fly, I don't recommend. Setting together a plan for your community for the next 5-10 years, it may cost some money to do, but in the long term, you'll be able to do something really special with it. And if you are planning on doing major renovations, consider negotiating the design fees in with the maintenance contract for additional value. If you're going to want to plan a 5-10 year plan for your community, and you have, a large community that's a 6-figure to 7-figure contract, that's the time to negotiate and say, hey, we also want to work in a reduced fee for designs. Landscape consultants, what I like to use them for: master planning, contract performance dispute, quarterly evaluations, award submittals. If you're going to want to submit for an FNGLA award or an award for your community, they're great for that. Educational classes for residents, community garden establishment, and there's some really good irrigation consultants out there that, if you have questions, that can really help. All right. I'll try to make this really quick. Resident ticket system. Biggest thing I'll tell you, there's a lot of different ones out there. We have our own. All I say is everybody has a different way of doing it. Ask for a live update, like not just a PDF, not a Zoom. I'm sure Jonathan will tell you this too. He's happy to give you a live Zoom demonstration of how it works. Don't trust some printed PDF. Ask for the live, because what's printed in that PDF can be anything. What you can do live in Zoom tells the truth of what's going on, right, Jonathan?
Absolutely, yeah. Having a ticketing software is absolutely fantastic. That's one of our most popular features. Landscaping is one of our most popular subjects that people use it for. But making sure that it's visible for those residents as well as administrators, and then having updates, making sure that people know, oh, it hasn't been touched in a week or whatever it might be. But making sure that they're getting updates when those issues are resolved is really important.
Yeah, and having true, SMS technology where it's not your number at whatever. They're good questions to ask, but I'm running out of time. Interview questions. What I always like to ask is, what are the key factors of success for this project and how will you accomplish them? When I was bringing in contractors, what happens when things go wrong? We always talk about how great this is going to be. This is landscaping. Things are going to go wrong. Ask, what are you going to do when they are, and what are the most common things that you see going wrong? Another big one is on their manpower. What percentage of your maintenance labor is subcontracted or temporary? You really want to be careful of those guys that use quite a bit of subcontractor temporary labor. Ask about training employees on safety. What's the job specific training they're going to get for your site? What's their morning routine? Is there a morning safety routine? And how is their customer excellence rewarded? There are certain programs people put in place to make sure their guys understand, like, hey, if you break something, tell us, nobody gets charged for it. Hey, if you go over and above and get a 5-star review on Google, you get, rewarded for that also. And then finally, ask them about the resources available, because we're only as good as our resources, and their capabilities. So seeing what they're certified in, their licenses, if they're, educators, and how they handle hurricanes. And then what technology they bring to the HOA that adds value. And I think that is it. Perfect. Did I end on time? Wow, with 1 minute left. There we go, John.
Look at that. But you're not quite done. I do have one other question from David. Back to mulch. He was asking about rubber mulch for decorative areas rather than holding water need. So I guess, how does rubber mulch affect irrigation?
So here's with rock mulch and other inorganics. So one thing you have to consider with rubber mulch is it might not necessarily save on irrigation. And what they found is, especially with black rubber mulch, is it retains heat, right? It's a good retainer of heat opposed to wood mulch. So it retains that heat into the evening and the cooler times and actually keeps the plant material warmer. So it doesn't necessarily do that. It is kind of a nice thing to have for playgrounds and whatnot. I wouldn't put it under any shrub material, because when that shrub material is raked out, they're raking out your very expensive mulch. But it's very good for playground and high traffic areas. We find it to use very well.
Wonderful. David, thanks for that question. And John, this has been a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Peggy, are you going to close us out? You're muted.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I wanted to say thank you also, John. But I wanted to also mention, because I have been in the landscaping business before, to the attendees that your cities may offer some grants for new plant installation, or even trees, like after a storm and so on. And you just have to apply for it, and it's something I believe every city has available. So it's first come, first serve when the money runs out, of course. So it's a new year, new beginning of the year. It might be a good time to look into some grants available to spruce up your community. Like I said, thank you so much. John, awesome presentation, a lot of detail, good information. This has been recorded. It will be available for a YouTube seminar to look at later. Also, Brian, I want to say thank you again. Brian did a lot of work as far as promoting this particular meeting, and thank you, of course, to all the sponsors that did promotions. I wanted to say thank you for everybody who attended, and I want to wish everyone the best in 2021, especially with COVID. I want you to have a healthy and prosperous and also peaceful year, and wear your mask, please. Thank you. See you in the next seminar.
Bye, everybody. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you.